Man, I can't ask for a better start to start the sermon this week, right? Just getting up to hear Garrett's story, and just also before the service, I was talking to Tim, and he was signing up for the financial peace class. And just to see that lives are being changed, that doors are opening up, that there's areas that we are gaining knowledge and that we are starting to win with money and start taking those action steps. So I love hearing Garrett's story, because it shows that if we put the faith and trust in God, He's faithful to take care of us. So I do have some good news for Robbie. This is my last week. So he doesn't have to, he can stop giving mini sermons and actually give actual sermons. And maybe Hannah gets a little bit more of my time on Saturdays. So I think she's pretty pumped as well. So anyway, I would like you to meet Bill and Claire Smith. So if I'm looking at Bill and Claire Smith from this outside perspective, their life is pretty wonderful. They're living the American dream. See, Bill and Claire have a pretty good life. They have pretty good jobs. They've been married for 10 years, and they have two beautiful, lovely children, Johnny and Jane. On top of that, they make $90,000 a year. Things are going well for Bill and Claire. They own their own home. They have two brand new cars. And it seems like they just own all the nice toys and gadgets that you can imagine. In fact, if I didn't know any better, I'd say they're sponsored by Apple themselves. Not to mention, it seems like they always get to go on these nice vacations every year. Yes, if I'm looking at Bill and Claire's life, I would say they're successful. Are they rich? No. But life seems pretty comfortable. From an outside appearances, we look on Bill and Claire's life and we say, that's what I want. But like so many of us and so many people around you, when you look at somebody, appearances are deceiving. You see, Bill and Claire's life is falling apart. They're suffocating. I want to dive deeper on Bill and Claire's life as an example so we can look at their financial situation a little bit more. So obviously they own their own home. But guess what? They have a $150,000 mortgage. They own two brand new cars, but they owe $17,000 and $23,000 on those cars. And obviously, Bill had to pay his way through school, so he took out $32,000 in student loans. And let's not forget the various credit cards that racked up an additional $19,000 in debt. See, the choices that Bill and Claire have made up until this point have left themselves in a giant hole. And just recently, Bill got the tragic news that he's being laid off. Because with the oil prices being down, obviously the economy is taking a hit. With all these sufferings and all these tribulations, all the trials building up, suddenly Bill and Claire are starting to fight and even contemplating divorce. Now, if you're looking at their financial situation, would you call that a success? Not even close. I want you to relate to Bill and Claire. And the reason why is because I think Bill and Claire represent so many American families today. And sadly, they represent so many Christians today as well. And the reason why is we have such a wrong perspective of finances in life and success. That we think, if I have this, if I look like everybody else, if I own my own home, if I have all these nice things, my life is worth something. But as we've discussed during the series, that it doesn't matter the amount that you have in your bank account, your value from God's perspective is set. He loves you, He cares for you, He passionately sacrificed everything for you. So it truly does not matter how well you're doing with money. But instead we get this concept in our minds that we have to live the American dream even if it's a fantasy. Our lack of contentment has caused us down this dark, miserable path that ultimately we end up like Bill and Claire, where our life is falling apart, our marriage is falling apart, all because we thought we had to live up to a certain standard. Now, what does this have to do with generosity? You might recall when I started the series, I listed 3 obstacles, didn't I? The first obstacle was this idea, if we have a lack of compassion for people, we're not going to care about them. If you don't care about the people around you, you're not going to be so incredibly generous in giving towards them. And that's so extreme opposite of what we find with Jesus, isn't it? You see, God had such an incredible love and compassion for you, He sacrificed everything so that you could have deliverance, so that you could have salvation, so that you could have a relationship with Him. He didn't stop there, though. We see after Jesus is resurrected and goes back to heaven, God actually sends the Holy Spirit to live inside of us if we're a believer in Jesus Christ. And see, that same kind of love and compassion that God has poured into you, He now gives you the ability to pour into somebody else. And one of the ways that we often do that is through our finances and through our money. All right, you might recall the second obstacle that I presented is closely related. It's this attitude of greed. Because greed tells us that we need more money, we need a better job, we need more things, we need more. Greed is never satisfied. So if we have the spirit of greed, we're constantly looking for more. And it's not necessarily that we don't care about the people around us. It's our priorities. But let's switch gears a little bit. Let's say you're the person that not that you have a lack of compassion. It's not that you want to be greedy. What is standing in your way now? Are there financial obstacles that prevent you from being generous in your life? And I think so often the case is yes. Let's take the Smith family for an example. Suppose that they really wanted to be generous. They wanted to give. They wanted to pour out. They had a particular ministry, a particular person that they truly wanted to reach. Because of the choices that they've made, the car payment, the house payment, the credit card debt, and because Bill just lost his job and they have no savings, can they give? No. Why? Financial mismanagement. See, God has equipped us with the resources to do amazing things. He has given us the wealth. He has given us the talents. He has given us the time. But so often, we waste it. See, in order for you to be generous, you actually have to have something to be generous with. You have to have something to give. The sad thing is, we often do until we waste it. See, we have a choice. We have an opportunity. God has given us the resources. He has given us the mission. He has given us the ability to do something extraordinary, but we have to make the choice. Are we going to manage His resources well, or are we going to blow it and waste it on our own selfish and foolish purposes? See, the idea that I want to discuss today is this idea of financial management, this idea of financial stewardship. It's such a powerful concept that we as Christians need to develop. And honestly, even if you're not a Christian, you figure out that if you learn to manage your resources better, life's just easier. So I want to focus in on this idea of stewardship. Stewardship, defined by dictionary.com, is the position and duties of a steward, a person who acts as the surrogate of another or others, especially by managing property, financial affairs, or an estate. It is the responsible overseeing and protection of someone considered worth caring for and preserving. This describes how I want us to view money. That we see in light of we are stewards. We are managers of what God has given us. I've said throughout the series that this amazing, almighty, perfect God has created everything in His beautiful creation, and He has made us special, unique, talented. He has made you awesome. And He has given you a special purpose and a special mission. And He says, all right, this is my beautiful creation. This is all the blessings that I'm pouring out to you. Now manage it. That is what God is asking us to do, to steward His resources. So with this idea of stewardship firmly in our mind, the question should be, how should I manage his money? I think to understand this, we need to get a strong view of why money exists. What is the purpose that God intended for it? So I want to take a look at this core concept because I think it really transforms how we view money, and then we can start actually viewing money as a powerful tool to do something great with it. So there's really three basic principles, three basic purposes. So if you are taking notes, don't worry, this won't be some complicated thing to write down. It's very simple. The reason why you have money, the reason why God has blessed you is very simple. You need to spend it wisely, save it wisely, and give generously. Not very complicated, is it? This is not some detailed financial expert getting up here giving you some long list of the purpose of money. It's very simple. We need to learn how to spend it, save it, and give it wisely. Now, here's the deal. We can't just do one of these things well, can we? See, I could have this mentality, well, I'm good at spending. I checked that one off the list, right? And then, who cares about saving it? I mean, that's dumb. Or who cares about giving it? I really want to master the spending part, and then I'll move on to the other steps. Or you could be the exact opposite person. You're that natural-born saver that says, you know what, I want to hoard money. But if all we do is save it and hoard it, we got this wrong perspective that almost looks at money as a sense of security, as our self-worth. And suddenly that's not the right answer. And let's say you're just the uber generous person. Well, if you haven't learned how to spend and save your money wisely, guess what? You have none of it to give. So that's why it's important that we master all three of these concepts, that we learn that we need to spend, save, and give wisely. All right, so let's start off with the notion of that God gave us money to actually spend it. Now, from a common sense perspective, you're probably like, duh? What else would I do with money other than spend it? That's why it's created. And from a common sense perspective, you know you need money, don't you? All right? Last I checked, it costs money to buy food. It costs money to pay for clothing, pay for housing, pay for all these things that you need just to survive on a daily basis. See, money is important. I love what Zig Ziglar always used to say. He said, money is not the most important thing in the world, in life, but it's reasonably close to oxygen. See, you're not going to argue with me to come up with this concept that money is meant to be spent. Now, if you haven't grown up in church, you won't have a problem with this. But if you're a longtime Christian, it's very common among Christian circles to get this idea that it's wrong for me to stand up and say money's important and that you should spend it. I mean, after all, you shouldn't worry about such things as money, and you should just go through life as poor or whatever, because obviously money is the root of all kinds of evil, right? Money's evil. Last week we talked about this concept, didn't we? In 1 Timothy chapter 6, we see that Paul actually says it's the love of money that's the root of all kinds of evil. See, what Paul is saying is, you know what, that money that you have is not good or evil. It's the person controlling it. It's the heart, the intention of the user. I love this great example. I went to a conference about a year ago, and the guy brought a brick. Pretty cool. So he said, you know what, this brick can be used to do something very beneficial, can't it? You can take a brick and bricks and help a family build a house that's struggling, that needs a place to live. From that standpoint, you look at that brick and say, that's good. Somebody can take the same brick and throw it through a window. You see, that brick is neither good or evil. It's all about the intention of the person wielding that brick and the purpose of what they want to do with it. You see, if I love God passionately, and I view money as simply as a tool, you know what? I can do amazing things with money. Very good things. I can change people's lives. I can really make a difference. But if I view money in the lens of I worship at the altar of materialism, I just want to bow down to money, it's all about the stuff that I can get with it. Guess what? Money is a tool for my destruction. It's all about my intent. See, you have a choice how you view money. So this concept, if money is simply a tool, if it's neither good or evil, how should we use it? Why does God give it to us? I think one reason that God gives it to us is to meet our daily needs. Because we have a loving Father that cares about us and has promised to take care of us and provide for us. And one way He does that is by giving us wealth so that we can maintain our life, so that we can buy food, so that we can buy clothing, so that we can buy shelter. I think the problem is our perspective at times. So many times we view money as I need more of it, I need a better job, I need this or that, just so I can buy more things, have cooler stuff, get the latest and greatest toys. That's often how we view money. But instead we need to stop and reflect and say, maybe the reason why God's blessing me today with this job, with this wealth, with these benefits, is because God is saying to me, I'm providing for you. In Luke chapter 12, we see Jesus instruct us. He says, therefore I tell you, do not be anxious, do not worry, do not stress about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap, they neither have storehouse nor a barn, and yet God feeds them. How much more value are you than the birds? See, what God is saying is, if I care so much about animals, how much more do I then care about you? See, God gives us wealth, God gives us resources because He's a loving Father handing down to His children, providing for them. The reason why I spend money to buy Riley food and clothes, and the reason why I give him presents on Christmas is because I love my son. The reason why God gives you money, the reason why He blesses you with a job, or people around you to help take care of you and support you, is because that's God saying to you, I love you. You're my children. Here's something to take care of you with. I love in Hebrews 13:5, I know we've read it during the series, but I want to read it again. It says, if anyone does not keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have, for He has said, I will never leave you or forsake you. The reason why I can sit back and I can look at how much money and not worry about it is because I have this loving Father that cares so deeply for me, and He has made one promise to me among many. He says, you know what? I will never turn my back on you. I will never leave you. I will never let you down. So at the end of the day, when I say you need to be content, it's because you have a loving Father that says, you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm going to take care of you. It doesn't matter how difficult your life gets, all kinds of situations that you face, whether you're broke, whether you're rich, I will never leave you or forsake you. All right? So not only do I think God gives us money to take care of our needs, guess what? He gives us money to take care of our family's needs as well. And I would say, actually, if God has blessed you and you're not using your blessings and your resources to take care of your family, you're actually in sin. It says in 1 Timothy chapter 5, if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for the members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So somebody that gets all these blessings from God, but then turns his back on his family, that person is actually worse than somebody that doesn't even believe in God. That's basically a condemnation that we can't get up here and say, you know what, I can give to this charity, or I can help out in this orphanage, or I can do this or that, but yet your family's struggling. That's why if I'm counseling someone, I want to give them hope. Because if you're struggling financially, you're dealing with a lot of debt, you're trying to get yourself out of this financial hole, the only thing I'd say to you that you need to be giving to the church, you need to be giving the tithe, but don't worry about giving to every little ministry that pops up. I'm sure they need it, but you have to make sure first and foremost that your family is being taken care of. That's why God gives you money. And I also mentioned this last week. Another reason why God gives us money is so that we can enjoy it. I was talking to Jonathan after the service, and he's like, I didn't hear anything you said in the sermon until the end when you said, I'm to enjoy my money. Now, that's not exactly a right picture. You have to be generous. You have to take care of your family. You have to meet your needs. Then enjoy the money within a wise framework. But part of the reason why God gives us money is so that we can enjoy it. Now, I encourage you to exercise a little bit of wisdom. I didn't say that was the main reason God gives us money. I'm just saying it's not wrong for you to use some of it for enjoyment. Let's look at example for example. Take example. Let's imagine that a family wanted to go on a $15,000 vacation. Get the whole family up. Take them, just this very grand vacation. Now, for many of us, including me, I look at a $15,000 vacation, I'm like, that's a little extravagant. Of course, honestly, for me, I'm lucky to take a $1,000 vacation. But if my family's struggling financially, I'm not giving like I should, I don't have a spirit of generosity, I really don't have my household in the right place. If I went on a $15,000 vacation, it'd be unwise. Wouldn't y'all agree? Not a smart decision. But let's say that I'm another family. I'm incredibly generous. I tithe. I have a proper view of money. My family's in good financial shape. And that $15,000 just represents a small amount of my income. Would it be unwise for that family to go on a $15,000 vacation? The answer is no. Because it's honestly oftentimes more about our heart towards stuff versus our heart towards God. Because if your heart is sitting back and you know what, I want to enjoy money just because stuff is awesome. I love buying toys. I love having the latest and greatest things. You know what? I don't care how much money you have. It is not right for you just to spend that money for your own enjoyment. But if your mentality is, God has blessed me, and I want to use a little bit for my enjoyment because God is a loving Father. He's that dad that's giving you that Christmas present on Christmas Day. It's all right to enjoy a little bit. There's so many examples where you look throughout Scriptures and you see incredibly wealthy men that God never condemns. You look at Abraham, David, Solomon, all these rich people that God never condemns. But yet you see so many other times in Scriptures where Jesus doesn't seem to have high things to say about somebody that's wealthy. But you know the reason why? It's because their heart was the issue. See, when Jesus going up and talking to somebody, he looks at their hearts and he says, you know what? That money is standing between him and me. But if you have a proper view of money and you realize that, guess what? Money is just a tool. It's all right to occasionally enjoy a little bit of it. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's pretend that you're the type of person you're like, don't worry, I have no problem. I fully believe that money is for meeting my needs, my family needs, and enjoying it. Done. We're good, right? Let's leave. You told me I need to enjoy money? Let's go enjoy some money. Or maybe you're like me, the natural-born saver. I was joking, I think it was last week, I said that Hannah gets frustrated because I even save my blow money. All right? I was the type at like 4 and 5, I had my little money jar and I was sitting there counting. I wasn't the wisest one because I let my brother swindle me out of it. But I was the type where I was putting my money in, I take it out every day just to count it. See, I'm a natural-born saver. But I know many of you are natural-born spenders. Is either one of them right or wrong? I think if we're focusing on extremes, if you're either a saver or a spender, the question is, the answer is neither one of you is correct because you need to do both of them. And I think part of the reason why we need to have the spirit of saving as well is because sometimes God has given you blessings today because he has this pretty cool feature that he can actually see what's coming up in the future. See, maybe God sees that, guess what? You're about to have this accident. And so I'm blessing you, I'm giving you excess today to help you cover the problems that you're going to face in the future. You know, God can see if your car's going to break down 2 or 3 months from now. God can tell that, oh, wait a minute, this person's about to lose his job. God can say, you know what, that person's going to grow old one day, won't be able to work as much. So God gives us resources in the moment to help us prepare for the future. There's a great example in the Bible. If you turn to Genesis chapter 41, and you notice in the book of Genesis, a large portion of it is spent focusing on this guy named Joseph. And for good reason. See, God had a special plan for Joseph's life. See, God was going to use Joseph to help rescue and save his people. But Joseph's life didn't start off well. It's not one of those warm, fuzzy, feel-good stories that God was with him the whole time, you know, like David, who was like slaying bears and lions and all that good stuff. No, Joseph's life was started off a little bit rougher. His brothers hated him, and honestly, probably for good reason. He was a little annoying. Not to the extent they hated him, but I could understand why they'd be a little bit mad at him. They sell him into slavery. Worst brothers of the year award goes to them. Sells him to this guy. He eventually ends up in Potiphar. Potiphar's wife frames him for adultery. He gets then put into prison. At this point, he's in prison for a little while, and there comes this pretty cool moment where we see that Joseph actually has like this superpower. All right? He's like one of those mutants. The reason why I say that is because Joseph could interpret dreams. I really wish I had Joseph sometimes. Because every day I wake up, almost every day when I'm there in the morning, Hannah turns to me and she says, you know what, I had this really weird dream. This happens every single day. I'm at the point I'm like, what dream do you not consider weird? So she always has these weird dreams, and sometimes it'd be really nice to have somebody like Joseph. I'm like, can you figure this dream out? This is weird. But Joseph has this superhuman ability. So one point in history, we see that God sends Pharaoh this dream. And Pharaoh's really troubled. So somebody that knew Joseph in prison says, you know what, there's this guy down here. He's pretty good at this stuff. You should call him up. So he comes up. Pharaoh tells him the dream. And Joseph promises to give an interpretation. That's where we're going to start the story, that Joseph is giving the interpretation of this dream. Genesis 41, starting in verse 28, says, it is as I told Pharaoh, God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. But after them there will rise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. Translation on this dream interpretation. All right, Pharaoh, you're going to have 7 awesome years. Everything's going to work right. You're going to be plentiful. You'll have your crops. They'll produce a lot. You'll be very successful. Everything's going to work out well. But then you'll have a famine. Imagine this. Let's just say in our economy, everything's going to pick up for the next 7 years. The economy's going to go through the roof. Everybody's making money. Everybody's getting raises. All the companies are hiring. Life is good. But then after that, we're going to go into a recession. Everything's going to be bad. People are going to get laid off. Suddenly there's no more food to feed enough people. Life is in despair. See, what Joseph's saying is this famine is going to be so bad that you're going to forget you even had those good years because it's going to eat away everything. He continues, he says, the famine will consume the land and the plenty will be unknown in the land by reason of the famine that will follow. For it will be very severe. And the doubling of Pharaoh's dreams means that things is fixed by God and God will shortly bring it back. Pretty cool. Joseph gives this awesome interpretation to Pharaoh. And so many times I read this story and I kind of miss over this part. I'm like, this is how God allow Joseph his way into Egypt because he could give this awesome interpretation. But I noticed something. The story doesn't actually stop here. You know, Joseph, the reason why he had such a big impact here is not because he interpreted this dream. It's because of the advice that he gave afterwards. We actually see that Joseph is a pretty smart financial guy. He says this, starting in verse 33. He says, "Now therefore let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man, and set him over the land. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land, and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the several plentiful years. And let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming, and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh and for the foods in the cities. And let them keep it, that food shall be reserved for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish through the famine." Let me break down a little bit of Joseph's advice here. He says, first of all, Pharaoh, you need to find somebody that's very wise, very discerning. Set him over the land to manage it. You have to have somebody handling your resources that can help this problem. You need a steward. It's almost the same as what God's saying is, I have given you this, now manage it well. Then Joseph says, you know what? There's a future famine coming, so let's start saving for it. Nice concept. Can you imagine this idea that we actually save for something that we know is coming? That's what Joseph is saying. And then ultimately, the reason why they need to save for it is not so that they can grow rich. It's so that during the 7 years of famine, the land will not perish. The people will not die. They will manage and get through this. See, when we see saving, this concept of saving in scriptures, it's not so that we can build our wealth. It's not so that we can get rich. It's not so that we can just do it for selfish reasons. The reason why we save is because we have these famines coming up in our lives. There's financial famines that we see coming, and we need to prepare for them. So I won't go into too many verses on saving, but I want to give you some real practical reasons why you should be saving. And the first reason we need to be saving is so that we can have an emergency fund. See, Dave Ramsey, author, speaker, and radio host, often talks about this thing called Murphy's Law. And if you don't know of it, it's this idea that if something could go wrong, it will. So you might notice that Fort Legorado is not up here. Apparently, after a couple of weeks in the car, Murphy's Law took place, right? Life happens, doesn't it? Things happen. Guess what? Your car breaks down. Something in your house goes out. Maybe a pipe burst. I'll give you a great example. So this past year, 1 week's time, a pipe burst in our house, destroys what's left of our master bathroom, and both of our vehicles break down. Call to the plumber, a trip to the mechanic shop. Guess what? I'm $2,000 poorer. Later that year, I get this brilliant idea. I'm driving my car, and I see this water, and I'm like, I'm just going to drive through it. Now, you may not know this. Cars don't like that very much. I mean, I thought I had one of the special, like, submarine Acuras. I didn't. Needless to say, that was a financial hit that we're still suffering through right now. Thank God that He gave me the funds and the vision to have an emergency fund. Because during those tough times, I never had to stop and say, how is my family going to financially get through this? How, with all these costs that we have to pay, are we going to pay our lights? Are we going to pay our house payment? Or we're going to buy food? I didn't have to worry about that because I had that emergency fund. See, I'm not asking you to set aside a bunch of money because I get some kind of security for it. I'm asking you to set aside a bunch of money because God gives you resources and you know bad things will happen. Why not plan for it? Dave Ramsey actually recommends if you're in debt now and you're trying to get yourself out of it, start off with $1,000 emergency fund. After you pay off your debt, except for your house, you know what? Bump it up to 3 to 6 months of expenses. Because it all comes with this idea that, guess what? If something bad could happen, it will. And if you're handling your resources, it doesn't take you very long to figure out sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes you have to pay a little bit of money, and you need that emergency fund. The second reason why we need to save is to avoid debt. Now, I won't go too far into this just because I don't have enough time. But debt is one of the biggest things that hinders us from winning with our money. The Bible actually says the borrower is slave to the lender. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be a slave. And God actually knows a thing or two, so maybe I'll take his financial advice and realize that maybe debt's not the best avenue for me. But there's so many times where we have these situations that pop up. We have no emergency fund. We haven't been saving for it. And guess what happens when the emergency occurs? We have to go into debt. Take out a credit card, get a loan, and we fall into it. But here's the deal. A lot of things we actually can see coming. Christmas, I don't know if you know this, it comes the same time every year. If you have a son or daughter, they might go to college. They might get married. If you have a car, it probably is not going to last forever. Retirement, we tend to grow old. We don't stay young, right? We can't work forever. A lot of these things we see coming, but yet we don't prepare for it. And so we have to go into debt. And lastly, I think I just spoke of this, we need to prepare for retirement. Because there's a day in time that we see that we can no longer work, we can no longer make the same kind of income. And what God is saying is, I'm blessing you right now to prepare for the future. But so many times we have this immaturity, this idea of instant gratification that says, you know what, I'm going to live for today. Who cares about tomorrow? And I know there's great people that want to take care of elderly and help out disabled, but that doesn't negate us of the responsibility of preparing for our future. If God has blessed you with the resources, it's time for you to start planning ahead. All right, now let's suppose you can master that spending and that saving part. We get to the real tough one, giving. And I don't say it's tough as in it's a bad thing. I would actually say this is the most awesome use you can use with your money. But it's so tough because it seems like we struggle with it. So often God gives us all these resources. We have a comfortable life, especially living in America, even if we're struggling financially. But then God asks for, what, a tithe? Calm down, God. I can't give any of that money away. I gotta pay for this program I'm doing, right? I mean, I'm trying to save up for the next P90X. P90X like 50. I gotta get in shape because clearly it's working. But then God asks, all right, now that I've given you these resources, now that I've blessed your life, now that I've done all these great things for you, give some of it away. I was reading this book last month. It was The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth by John Maxwell. And he had this awesome line in it. I just wanted to share this quote. He says this, when you focus more on the wants and needs of others, more of your own wants and needs are met. In contrast, when you choose to hoard what you have rather than give, you become the center of your own lonely universe and you become less content, not more. It's this idea that we think, all right, if I'm going to build wealth, if I'm going to win money, I have to hold on to it. Suddenly we become less content. If we let go and we start reaching out to people, guess what? It allows us to receive more as well. If we are going to grow as leaders, as individuals, as persons, if your life is going to produce greatness, you have to learn this concept of giving, because generosity is one of the most basic and thriving principles seen throughout Scriptures. We see that God had such generosity that He poured everything for us. And so what God is saying is, I've given you everything. I've given you all these resources. I've given you a job. Share it. Why would God want us to waste our lives? Why would you want your life to be ordinary, mediocre, when God has given you the tools to do something great with it? So how will you treat your neighbor? How will you treat your boss? How will you treat the ministries that God has placed a special burden on your heart? It's time to step up. Now, honestly, are these principles that complicated? I hate to say this, you don't need to be a CPA to understand these purposes. All we need to do is learn to spend our money wisely, give it wisely, and save it wisely. Not complicated. I don't need to go into a financial advisor to help me understand the basic principles of money. Now, that's not to say that once you have a good understanding of it, that you seek help. Like, for example, if you want to invest, I would say go see a financial advisor. But to understand the basic core of how I should live and how I should view money is not complicated. So what will you do with your money? Don't make this mistake that God does not care how you manage your resources. This is not just a financial issue, this is a spiritual issue. Because how you view money, how you treat money, how you give, how you spend, how you save reflects your view of God and your view of other people. Ultimately, if you're filled with this compassion, with this generosity, guess what? You realize that it causes so much freedom. It transforms our lives. When I sit back and say financial generosity is a key to financial success, it is so true. If you want to win with money, you have to open up your heart. You have to have this generosity. You have to start living responsibly. The choice is yours. Let's pray. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, we come before you. We thank you so much for just the opportunity that you give us. Lord, the blessings that you pour into our lives on a daily basis. Like so often, I have a wrong view, a wrong picture of how I should live and how I should handle money. Lord, I know that not every aspect, not all of our lives is centered around finances, but I know that it is just one component that's so key to us living a life that you love. At the end of my life, I want to come before you, Lord, and say, this is the talents, this is the time, this is the skills that you've given me. Look how I've multiplied it. And I want you to say, Lord, well done, my good and faithful servant. And I want the same thing to be said of everybody here. That we can stand before you and that we can offer what we've done with the time, the talent, the skills that you have blessed us with, and that you can say to us, well done, my good and faithful servant. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for your love, your generosity on the cross. It's in your holy name that we pray. Amen.